Sure.
First, I want to say welcome to the Bahrain Initiative for Development. This Zoom webinar is going to be about Pakistan's geopolitical pivot from supporting the Taliban to strategic confrontation. My name is Nili Kozad. I am an Afghan journalist. I've been covering Afghanistan and the region for almost a decade. Currently with TRT World in Istanbul, so it's really great to meet you all. And today we have Mr. Mohammed Omar Daudzai, former Afghanistan ambassador and special envoy to Pakistan, so welcome. We have Mr. Mohsin Dawar, president of the National Democratic Movement. Welcome to you as well, sir. And General Asad Ahmad Durrani, former chief of ISI. Can you all properly hear me, by the way?
Yes, we can.
Yeah.
Okay, great, excellent. So I just want to start with the short biography about Bahrain. Bahrain is an independent nonprofit organization committed to advancing Afghanistan's future through engagement with international research, academics, and policy communities. Bahrain advocates for human and women's rights, youth empowerment, and democratic values by fostering open dialogue and raising awareness on key Afghan issues. And through this Zoom webinar, the aim is to create a small platform where we can discuss topics that will empower Afghans and the region so we can build a better future. And Bahrain means heaven. Just providing a small nurturing space that empowers Afghans through this initiative. So I won't take too much of your time, but with regard to the topic. So Pakistan's foreign and security policy towards the Taliban has been one of, if not the most complex and contentious issues in South Asia. Once recognized as a key supporter of the Taliban in the past decades, today we are realizing a shift in its the way it's with its policy towards the Taliban, moving towards opposition. Some say this is a strategic pivot shaped by either domestic, regional, and international factors, but it carries profound implications for the region, for Pakistan's relationship with its neighbors, particularly Afghanistan, and also the global order. So with all of that being said, I want to start not with the current situation, but let's go back a little in the past. So Pakistan has been peddling a doctrine known as strategic depth. It's a military and geopolitical doctrine, primarily through the establishment of the ISI. From the 1980s onwards, this core idea was essentially to have Afghanistan have a friendly and controllable government in Afghanistan, which would serve as a buffer zone in case Pakistan gets attacked by its main enemy, I guess we can say, India. So through the strategic depth, Pakistan has supported Mujahideen fighters. Pakistan has backed the Taliban's rise in the 90s in the initial phase. It has provided sanctuary, training, and funding. So I want to start with you, Mr. Durrani. Now that we have this benefit of hindsight, we've seen how strategic depth has materialized. How do you assess this policy now? Did it yield the type of results that it had intended? And as you were a former chief of ISI, if you were to do a cost-benefit analysis, what would that look like? Is Pakistan safer today compared to the Cold War era?
So many things have changed, but what does not seem to have changed is the narrative of some people. They're still stuck with whatever happened 30, 40 years ago, maybe I can talk about a non-issue, static depth. I have no idea who said that, but it's a sound concept. Afghanistan does provide Pakistan a strategic depth, depending upon what the threat is. A bigger strategic depth was provided by Pakistan to the Afghans because they used to come here whenever they were attacked from outsiders. They not only got asylum here or a place to live, but also to do business. Also, it was a window for the outside world. So I am going to leave that strategic depth away for the time being. But in the question answer session, I'm quite willing to answer in details what these concepts actually mean. But the more important thing is what was our policy when Afghanistan was under foreign occupation. That has not changed. That was the real strategy. If Afghanistan is under the Soviet occupation or American occupation, Pakistan, as a policy, would support any resistance, whether they are called Mujahideen or the Taliban, regardless. And the reason was very simple. If there are foreign forces there, some of the Afghans, in fact, basically the tribesmen would always fight back. This is their history, this is what they have done, and the debris would fall on Pakistan. So that was the first pillar of our policy. Support the resistance because they had a good chance of getting rid of the foreign. If one is to come to the present position, I have no problems conceding. I did that in many of your Iraq security dialogues, latest in Madrid, that I think what did change was the policy that was the invention of one man in Pakistan. And that is what happens very often. The army chief here takes over, and after that, if he remains an unchallenged force, he imposes his policy. It's a one man policy to chase away or ask the Afghans to leave, which was a big disaster. And it was not challenged because that has also been our experience. And that was actually, that started the rot. It was such a disastrous policy, asking the Afghan refugees to leave. There's a humanitarian angle that all of you well understand. For people like me, it was the effect on the bilateral relation and the regional concern. That meant that we were now creating problems of friction with a neighbor with whom we've had a good relationship in the past. Always. A little bit of friction here and there, that is always there amongst neighbors. But Afghanistan was the one that used to defend our western borders when we went to war against India. Now, this is all history, and if it changed, I am here, I have no qualms admitting that this was a bad policy, asking them to leave, creating a problem with the Afghans, asking them to do something which, of course, all of you know, Afghan hands, that Afghans were not going to do it. No one could do it, but especially the Afghans could not. There was no doubt in my mind that they were not going to get hold of the TDP, round them up, put them in a cage, and hand them over. TDP was helpful to them. So the tradition of the Afghans is that if someone has been helpful to you, you never betray them. If someone has asked for or taken refuge in your country, you do not betray that. Osama bin Laden was one major example, but in case of the TDP, as I said, there was a particular role that they played. And the Afghans, the Taliban regime after 2003, when it became again, the in charge of or the master of the country, they told us very clearly, we can't do it. There is no physical possibility that we can round them up and send them back. But you are a big country, and they continue to say that. And you're a big country, once these people, they are your citizens, when they go there, with your army and your intelligence, your capability, you should take care of them. Precisely the argument that we used to give to the Americans when they said, please do something about the Taliban who have taken refuge in your country. And our government was, we have no problem with them. We are not going to create any other front. We have enough problems of our own. But if they are there, we, with your NATO forces and with all the capabilities, it's your job to take care. Precisely that's argument plus one. And that is already said. No, you don't betray people who have been helped. So this was the dilemma that had existed for a couple of years. The bigger disaster stuck when we violated the Afghan sovereignty for another time, sent the aircraft, bombarded some places, or sent some drones. I do not know what I did, but we sent some drones. Anyone in one's right senses would have known that if you do that, the Taliban or the Afghans or the Mujahideen or any government there would hit back. We also hit back when the Indians did that a couple of months ago when they came and bombed the places and the madrasas in Bahawalpur. We were going to hit back. This is the compulsion of a state. And this is what they have done. They had to hit back. And the worst part was that, you know, the old argument that I used to have long time ago, and that is to my great chagrin, to my discomfiture, it's just come back to haunt me. And that is that we have to take care of the Afghans, regardless of who rules that, because they not only defended our borders when we were at war with India, but if they get occupied by forces which are inimical to the Afghans, to the Taliban, to the Afghans, the tribesmen, to the Afghans generally, then we would be confronted with a two-front situation. India in the east, not a very friendly country. And now it was when the Soviets invaded an Indian friendly superpower. So that created that environment in which we said, well, now that we have fallen the jaws of a nutcracker, we should do something to break out of it. And that also led to one additional factor that we supported the Mujahideen. Now, because of this very flawed policy, and I cannot say that often enough, it is now a situation in which we have inevitably, which was going to lead to a two-front situation. India is very happy. They've already admitted. Their former army chief, V.P. Malik, very clearly said, I mean, such honest people are very difficult to find. Pakistan provided us the opportunity, and so we are going to cozy up to the Taliban. We are going to accept that to create further discomfiture for that. So that is where we stand right now.
So you're saying
present situation has nothing to do with strategy. It has to do with the one-man policy that was incidentally opposed by the institution. That much I know. Yes, go ahead.
But this policy has essentially left Pakistan, as you said, in a very difficult predicament on both sides. So I want to talk about how this strategic depth has specifically affected the border areas of Pakistan and Afghanistan. And Mr. Dawar, I know you are from the border areas, and a lot of the violence, a lot of the activity has been in those regions, in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, in Balochistan, where you're from. And you are someone who advocates for the rights of the people there, which are majority Pashtuns, the civil liberties of Pashtuns. So how would you assess strategic depth? How did it affect the area that you come from? How much influence did it have? And also, I just want to say, on a human level, what was the effect of the daily life of the average Pashtun individual? How did that look like?
Well, thank you so much, Marine Institute, for inviting us in a very crucial time where too many things are happening around. Starting from the question of how did the strategic depth policy of the deep state of Pakistan affected the people of the bordering areas, or I would say that the entire Pakhtunkhwa have been affected. I think, as we say in Pashto, you cannot separate Pashtuns across Afghans across the Durand, from each other. And a policy, on Afghanistan would definitely have an impact on the Pashtuns living on this side of the Durand. And that's what we have been facing from last, I would say, 45 years. It started with the Afghan jihads, and basically it was a US Cold War and a US project, and for that purpose, militancy, extremism was injected amongst the masses in Pashtunkhwa. Thousands of madrasas were established, and then a deliberately kind of mindset was tried to build, which can then go and fight in Afghanistan against the Soviet Union, with the notion of jihad and with the, as I said, with the training and with the motivation, because that's how they have been trained, and it happened in multiple levels. The people were tried to brainwash through media. People were tried to brainwash through movies. They were tried to brainwash through school curriculum, and all these things to make together, it created an environment which made a motivation amongst the general public in Pakhtunkhwa towards war and towards the fight and so-called jihad in Afghanistan. And so to cut the story short, it was war. People were prepared for a war, and the war has a specific impact on the society. War brings destruction. War brings it brought the Kalashnikov culture here. It brought there were too many other things like drugs and drug trafficking and all these things attached with that. So initially one phase of the Mujahideen, in the next phase of the Taliban, and then after the 9/11, when things completely came to this side of the Durand, then it was a time when before that they were directly affected, and after the 9/11, the battleground was directly Pakhtunkhwa, across the Durand here. And after that, we have seen that initially militants from all around the world, they were brought to different areas of Exparta, specifically North and South Waziristan. There was Uzbeks, there were Chechens, and there were Arabs, in too many, Al-Qaeda, Islamic movement of Uzbekistan, and you just name it, So North Waziristan was made a headquarter of all these things. And then after a few years, they decided to lodge an operation randomly in different areas, in Bajawad, in South Waziristan, in North Waziristan, in Khyber, even in Malakand division, in Swat. And in the entire, during all this time, people have suffered from each and every aspect in their life. Their education suffered, their businesses suffered, and during the byproducts of this war was people, the extremism, and then during the oppression against all these things, they initially created all things, and then they decided to launch oppression against them. And during that oppression, the entire villages were destroyed, and then people were disappeared, and these things are still going on. So someone who architected a chaos, they blame the locals for what happened, and they have the locals and the Pashtuns on this side of the Durand, or I would say across the Durand, they have been suffering from the policy of the initially the strategic debt. One thing which I would like to clarify, as General Durrani said, that people came here and they claimed asylum. I think there is a general rule amongst around the world that if you go somewhere and you claim asylum, you get all the protection within a few years. Well, this is something, strange. I think it might be happening only in this part of the world, that people who spent here 40 years were sent back, with the short notice and without. So they lived there for 40 years without any protection, and now they have been sent back. I have seen some videos of some Afghans who have been living in different areas of Punjab who can't even, speak proper Pashto. The only language they understand is the Saraiki or the Punjabi or the local languages spoken over there. So they have been now sent back to Afghanistan. So as long as the recent chaos is concerned, as I said in the start, that it started with the international strategic objective. The US and their allies, they came here for their own strategic purpose, and they carried on. And after after a very long time, they decided that we need to go another way, and they have other intentions for this region. They have other strategic objectives for this for this region, and then they decided to talk with Taliban, and then Pakistan facilitated, because they have been always playing a role of a local contractor for America, in all this war on terror and everything which happened during the last 45 years. So they facilitated the Doha talks, and then after the Doha talks, the Republic of Afghanistan was de-recognized, and followed by the events, the way the prisoners were released from the jails, and then the way the takeover of Taliban was facilitated by the US, and with the support and on-ground logistic support of Pakistan with the Taliban. So the local interest of Pakistan is because they're worried about the identity question of the Pashtuns here, and definitely in their connections across the Durand. And apart from that, they want their hegemony in Afghanistan also. So, and for that purpose, they want people who work under their umbrella to be ruling Afghanistan. And they initially believed it. I would say they still are enjoying that liberty, because anyone ruling Afghanistan with the name of religion, I think they don't have any issue with that. The only reason we are watching this recent confrontation is because they have to give a narrative to the rest of the Pakistan also. So it's the general public of the Pakistan also about the chaos which is happening right now in Pakhtunkhwa. And that is also, I said, it is the continuation of why the Doha deal was signed. It was signed because the West wanted this region to be used for another strategic purpose against China. And for that purpose, they handed over Afghanistan, and they want the same chaos in Pakhtunkhwa also. And for the same purpose, Taliban were brought back, and they were settled in different areas of Pakhtunkhwa, and the Pakistan agencies in the army, they facilitated this whole process. Right now, because there are too many things happening, and people come with questions and they want explanations. So just to build a narrative, it has been said that because there are Taliban in Afghanistan, and that's why that's why there is an unrest here. Well, the fact is, I just tweeted one of my clip from my speech in Parliament a while ago, where I have been telling that, look, these are two faces. These are same thing, and two sides of a same coin. And there is no disconnection between Afghan Taliban and the local Taliban who are operating in Pakistan. The Afghan Taliban are their mentors. They train the local Taliban.
Yeah, sorry to cut you off, but we will get to the current conflict or clashes happening. But you mentioned the identity topic about Pashtuns. Are Pashtuns there's a narrative going out there saying that Pashtuns are essentially scapegoated, because if we see the Taliban, I mean, they comprise mostly of Pashtuns. So the identity of Pashtuns is a question. So how did this policy really affect the question of Pashtuns in where you come from?
Because they want to replace the identity with a religion, with ideology which is based on religion. And that's why they believe, if you see in the current conflict, after bringing back the Taliban, they have a kind of shrinked the space for nationalist politics. And that was the purpose of bringing them back in Afghanistan also, because the Taliban, Pashtuns have affected the most from the ideology of Taliban, from the presence and from the activities of Taliban on the both sides of the, the destruction they did in Afghanistan. Everybody, that is also on the record. But what they did and what they're still doing now is still, on every second day we come across the target killings of nationalist political workers, journalists, businessmen. And interestingly, I have said it many times before, nobody can wish someone the situation from which the Pashtuns in Pakistan are facing now. But interestingly, this chaos and this encroachment of the Taliban, it is not crossing the borders of Pakhtunkhwa, which is quite certain. We wish peace and harmony for the entire world, but this is something strange that so that's why we call it a very controlled project. And that control project, it started from the Doha deal, and then the purpose was to hand over all this region to militants and then use it strategically in the future against the Belt and Road Initiative, and to contain the economic expansion of China.
So what you're saying essentially is this region is again being used. Basically,
once again in the line of fire, and we have been, and interestingly, there is also a debate going on, because a few days ago, DGI SPR and came here to Peshawar, and then I'm going through the timelines of different journalists and politicians from the mainstream Pakistan, and they said that, look, why is it happening? We have been made, as you said, that as scapegoats once again, and we have been used as a raw material for this strategic objectives once again.
Right. Mr. Daudzai, I want to now get your perspective. As a journalist, when I speak to Afghans, I've spoken to Afghan politicians at the top level, and I've also spoken to Afghan, for example, taxi drivers or students. And when you speak to any of these people regarding the situation in Afghanistan, they're always most likely pointing fingers to Pakistan, saying that Pakistan is the reason for Afghanistan's ongoing instability, and the narrative usually is the same. So, how would you say Pakistan's strategic depth policy? How is it viewed from the Afghan lens? And you are also previously worked for the former government. If you look back at the time that you were working, what were the major concerns of Afghans? And why was there no space for cooperation between Afghanistan and Pakistan?
Thank you, Nili, and thank you, Barin, for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to meet you, and more particularly to meet my distinguished brothers, General Saib and Dawar Saib. Let me give you a historical context, and then I will come to a bit more details, but I might try to be quick and brief. When I was serving Afghan government, I served as chief of staff to president, and we started a system that we divided key countries among us, that somebody was looking after one or two countries as his or her portfolio. And it happened incidentally that I was looking after Pakistan's portfolio with a couple of other countries. Now, as part of my portfolio, I had to dig into the background of our relationship and how it evolved, with the intention that how to find better ways to ensure peaceful coexistence and have a reasonably good level of trust. In my search, I came across an assessment that was carried out in 1950s. And the team that carried out, I don't remember the names, but I only remember the name of the leader of the team, whose surname was Siddiqui. I have no idea who he was. My two distinguished friends may have heard his name. Now, in his report, he considered Afghanistan as the enemy of internal cohesion of Pakistan. So as long as there was a stable Afghanistan, because at that time it was monarchy and Afghanistan was the most stable country in the region. In his report, he referred to Afghanistan as a threat to the internal cohesion of Pakistan. And therefore, the policy was arranged as such to prevent that Afghanistan's influence. So at that time, there was no reference of considering Afghanistan as strategic debt to Pakistan. It was the other way around. And then it happened in 1980s. That point was proven when Soviet Union came to Afghanistan, as General Saib alluded to. Then millions and millions of Afghans migrated to Pakistan, crossed over the Durand line to Pakistan, and used it as their backup stronghold. And started fighting from there against the Soviet Union. So yes, I agree now with General Durrani that Afghanistan used Pakistan as its strategic debt in 1980s. But towards the end of that decade, when the Soviet Union withdrew and collapsed, then a new thinking emerged in Pakistan. They didn't know how to describe that new situation and how to arrange Pakistan's policy. Right at that moment, President Ziaul lost his life. I wouldn't go to the details of it, but his successor in the army was General Mirza Aslam Bek. He was known for issuing miscalculated statements. And he said Afghanistan was Pakistan's strategic debt. Then analysts added that he means if India invade Pakistan, then Pakistan could retreat to Afghanistan and use Afghanistan as a backup stronghold like Pakistan did. Then when Pakistan became nuclear 10 years later, that statement totally became useless for Pakistan because Pakistan said, well, we are now nuclear. If India cross over to Pakistan 100 meters, then we will use our weapon. So we don't need a backup stronghold. But for Afghanistan's policy, they needed to find another definition, how to look into Afghanistan. And in my opinion and in my analysis, they came up with a definition of strategic bridging. And by strategic bridging, I mean that at that time, the US lost interest in the region. They packed up and left. Soviet Union was gone. China was nowhere. It was not a strong country. Pakistan was considering itself as a strong mini superpower. Not superpower, mini superpower, and having eyes on Central Asia, on Central Asian resources, and on Central Asia to have influence there. Now, Afghanistan was a bridge to Central Asia. And therefore, they launched the Afghan Mujahideen that they had trained and they had nurtured, and they expected the Afghan Mujahideen to take Pakistan's influence to Central Asia. But that failed, incidentally failed, because there was no counter strategy. There was no other country to counter the Pakistan strategy. Incidentally, it failed because the Afghan Mujahideen started fighting with each other. And then that fight provided an opportunity to India and Iran to come into the scene and supported Pakistan's opposition. Now, Pakistan was standing behind Gulbuddin Hekmatyar fully, but he failed to deliver. And then Pakistan needed another card to replace Gulbuddin Hekmatyar. An offshoot of the Mujahideen parties emerged, that was Taliban. And then Taliban was supposed to deliver Pakistan's influence into Central Asia and serve as the bridge to communicate with Central Asia and to have access to Central Asian resources, whatever. Then came 20 years gap in all of this, because after 9/11, that was accident, and the US came, disrupted everybody's plan. So was Pakistan's plan disrupted. 20 years later, Pakistan definitely helped Taliban to come to power, hoping that they will recapture from where they had left in 2001, and then helped directly or indirectly Taliban to take over Kabul. But once Taliban take over Kabul, again, the whole thinking changed, because Taliban thought that they were the superior. They were holding superior ideology, and they were holding superior army and superior motive. And they thought considering Pakistan as the extension of their ideology, as extension of their motive. And I started hearing the slogans like the whole aim is Ghazwa-e-Hind. That was the slogan, that was the narrative among the Taliban, Afghan Taliban in 2001, 2002. Now, who was located on the way to Ghazwa-e-Hind? That was Pakistan. And then who were their troops to provide that opportunity? That was TTP. So, go back to 1950s. In 1950s, Pakistan thought that Kabul was influencing Pashtun and Baloch to disintegrate Pakistan. Now, Pakistan is blaming TTA for using TTP to disintegrate Pakistan. I'm not saying that it's baseless. There's always a reason for one making the statement, but that's the reality. So, what happened then? Pakistan felt threatened by TTP, and obviously the situation I look at, it's very similar, the Pakistan situation, to Afghanistan situation of 2018, 2019. At that time, we were getting a list of daily casualties, about a dozen of soldiers, about a dozen of police, and then many of the civilians. Exactly the same is happening now in Pakistan. So it's a matter of concern. It's a matter that to think about it, but there is a truth in that that the table is turned around. Afghanistan is no longer, I mean, Taliban's Afghanistan is no longer the strategic depth or strategic bridge for Pakistan. It's actually subject to influence by Taliban through TTP. To what aim? We have to wait. I was a bit surprised with the welcome India gave to the Afghan Taliban foreign minister, because yes. I know 4 years down the line, India would be complaining exactly the same. That
yes. We're going to get into that topic about India. The visit to India, but I also just want to ask you, is it possible for Afghanistan and Pakistan are their national interests so different? Is it possible to have a sort of win-win situation?
It's possible. We had reached very close to that situation in 2018, actually, 18-19. We even agreed on a common framework, which we called it APAPS, Afghanistan, Pakistan plan of action for peace and solidarity. And there were 5 areas of cooperation. Mechanism was defined. Afghanistan and Pakistan, for the first time in history, established a joint military commission. So, but then what happened in Doha surprised all of us. Taliban emerged as victorious, and Taliban and Pakistan thought that that discussion with Kabul within the APAPs was then no longer useful because their best friend reached to the power center. And they thought, well, what we expect is the Taliban are going to deliver. We don't need the Afghan Republic anymore. So then the Republic collapsed and Taliban emerged. But yes, as ex-Afghan ambassador, a special envoy, as somebody looking after Pakistan's portfolio for 20 years, yes, I know there was possibility to build the level of trust that was required between the two of us. And then I'm not talking about the fences of the Durand line. We were thinking of the opposite, because back in 70s and 60s, anybody from going from Jalalabad towards Peshawar, or from Peshawar towards Jalalabad, there were no need for visa, no need for passport. Some of them had an ID card, and they will show at the cross point and then cross over. So I think that's the solution that we need between Peshawar and Jalalabad, between Kandahar and Quetta, that people are free to go towards each other, to trade, and that's not impossible to achieve. If France can achieve that with Germany, and Germany with many other countries, they had much better wars. Why can't we achieve it between Afghanistan and Pakistan? But I think some opportunities were lost. I'm sure they will come back, but not to my generation. They will come back to the next generation.
Right. So in today's climate now, with everything in the past, I mean, we're no longer in the Cold War era. The dynamics of the region have shifted immensely. Today, there is no Soviet Union. We have a rise of China as a significant player in the region. The U.S. Has effectively no footprint in Afghanistan, and the Taliban has been running Afghanistan for now 4 years. With their rule, they have imposed restrictions on women's rights. They have imposed restrictions on media, but they're also facing a lot of issues, a lot of economic issues, security challenges, as we discussed now with the TTP, political issues. I mean, the only country that is recognized, the Taliban, is Russia. So now that we have Mr. Durrani back, great to have you back again. Let's talk about Pakistan's changing position. How has it evolved since this discussion that we've had with regard to the Taliban now in power again? Is it truly choosing the path to confront the Taliban? When did it decide to make this pivot? And what is Pakistan truly concerned about right now? What are its top priorities for its own national interest?
Who are you asking the question?
This is for Mr. Durrani.
Okay.
Thank you. I was always here, simply switched off my camera.
Okay, we lost you.
I listen very, very carefully to everything, because that is the idea. Because my thesis is that it is such a complex place, Afghanistan, that we all may understand a part of it, but never the whole of it. I used to learn, I mean, Ambassador Dawodzai is a witness to that. One went there, every time one learned something new. When he was here, it was such a great pleasure to talk to him, especially because we had so many common friends, including Hamid Karzai, who used to talk about Pakistan and Afghanistan as twins. Now, that is, I think, one answer. Inevitably, these two countries have no choice but to find a modus vivendi It started with a very wise Pakistani politician back in the 50s, Ajmal Khattak, who talked about such an union between the two countries, which could be called either a confederation, a union, an association, an understanding. But he knew that without the two working together, it's going to be difficult. As far as the misunderstandings are concerned, I am not bothered about that, frankly, because there are within the country we have misunderstanding, we have bad feelings towards so many different factions. So that's all right. And my admiration for the Afghans lies in the first place because they have their own opinion. They like to stay by that. They cannot be pressurized to do something. So once again, my admiration goes in that direction. As far as your question is concerned, the problem in a country like Pakistan is every Afghan that I met in my service days and later on knew this country very well, our country, because they've been coming, going, they've been studying. In Pakistan, the decision makers usually do not know enough about their own countries because they've come there temporarily because of either a flawed election or because of a particular post. And they will take 2 to 3 years to understand what it is. And by the time they get the hang of it, they're out. So if it is left to them to take the decision, then we will end up with certain very, very flawed consequences or disaster consequences. I keep conceding to these faults for the simple reason that at a certain stage, you must talk about that. It's not about any defending Pakistan or offending anyone else, including Afghanistan or India. It is just to explain what is my understanding. Now, I think I leave the strategic depth part because the master has explained it beautifully well. I can certainly talk about a little bit about refugees that Mosandawar said. I completely empathize with that. I have also hardworking, honest, dedicated, and I considered them to be better citizens of Pakistan than are, run of the mill people. And that is what pained me the most when, this new policy was there. It's not only because, they were they had lived there, they had learned even to play cricket here, in which they are probably going to be world champion one of these days. And I've known their students who are so hardworking. The problem comes when there are people who are eyeing, to start with, looking for scapegoats for their own deficiencies. So it's very easy to put the blame on someone else. Why not the Afghan refugees? Now that's an easier part because of them. After they have been told to go, things have not improved here, but at least they have said that. And for some people who were, rooting against them, they are enjoying because they've been able to get hold of the Afghan businesses that the Afghans have established, and they are happy for the time. The other is that, when it comes and, I can understand when Mohsen Dawar time and again talks about the Afghans, or the Pashtuns being in the crossfire. That's the battleground. I have spent some time in Germany, and East and West Germans, they always said, in case of a conflict, East-West, they would be affected the most. Of course they would, because they are at the junction of the two empires, two conflicting, two contradicting ones. So the Pashtuns, well, not by design, but it is the accident of geography that they would come and bear the whole cost. The other is about the policy. Yes, I hope if the policy has given rise to certain bad implications, I'm not going to deny that, but I always ask people that look, when
I think we lost Mr. Darani's audio. Can you guys hear him?
No.
No. Mr. Darani, are you there with us?
Okay, I think
Sorry,
we are
we
back.
lost you a bit.
If we are back, I mean, the option, I said, what would be a good option? You just sit back, let those people entrench or 40 or you know, fortify their regimes, then what would happen? What will be better off or not? A decision had to be taken, and the decision taken by the state here in Islamabad always was that we will rather side with the Afghans' resistance than with the aggressor. If it has caused some discomfort to some people, let me say that it's not only collateral damage, but if any apology on that side is going to be to satisfy people, I'm here. I'm still around. Zia has gone. So many other people have gone, but I'm still there. As one of the people who believed in this policy, you can always get hold of me and blame. But the intention was not to create anything else. We were not thinking about any ideology. We were certainly not thinking about good or bad Taliban or good or bad people. We were just thinking about a country free of occupation. Would that not be good for us? Because that they used to look after our flanks, left flank, called a strategic death, but the flank protection or the buffer zone was provided by the Afghans. If there is anything which is still bothering people, I am prepared to answer, but I have only one additional point, and that is that TTP. Oh, TTP is no good news for Pakistan. TTP did help there, and TTP is there, and handling the TTP according to our own teaching, according to our doctrine, which is prevalent in the Pakistan army, is by soft means, by soft power, not by force. And that is what is, again, one of the major faults that I find amongst my institution, especially by people who come after me, that they use bombs to solve a political problem. TTP was a creation of a particular policy. Ambassador Saab, you might remember that once Musharraf sent his forces in Waziristan, Dawar Saab also, if he was still, of that age, he might remember that people like us went to town opposing Musharraf's policy of sending army to the travel area without the consent of the League. This was a long time contract with them. When we did that, they were going to hit back. The first group that later on became a 40 group PTP was I think it was a Waziri group or a Masood group, which actually rose because in protest of our joining with America and in federal power to crack down against their co-religionists in Afghanistan. And that later on, that always happens, mushroom, escalated, became a group of 40 different parties. And now we do not know how all are still around in the TTP, but I still do know that the only way that we should be able to tackle with them, regardless of what the Afghan Taliban did, was do what we have been taught to do. So don't use force against them. Their own citizens, we use what we call force, but more persuasion. Force only to say, well, the persuasion is not, only theoretical, only, on paper or verbal, but the force is also there just in case the persuasion fails. But we have not done it. Yet another big mistake that not only my country, but almost every country makes when dealing with the insurgents or dissidents. We crack down against them because it's easy. Taking care of them politically is more difficult.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Darani, for that. I guess we can continue talking about TTP actually now that we're on this topic. Mr. Dawar, about your region again. I mean, right now there's reports that not only TTP is active, but there is ISIS, there is Al Qaeda, there is over 20 other terror organizations who are active in your region. So how do you see Pakistan managing these security concerns, and how is TTP posing a risk, inspiring new radicalization in the Pashtun heartland? I mean, we recently saw. We'll discuss the recent attack, but first on this point specifically with the active terror groups where you are.
Yeah, well, I think there are too many groups, as you said, and they have been operating in this region from last, I would say, 25 years after the 9/11, and all of them, they came there and they remained there, and then right now they have spread around almost in the entire province. And as long as the way the military is trying to contain them, look, they came to the tribal areas straight away after 9/11. And if I talk about just North Waziristan, there is one division force. There is one division force just in North Waziristan, which is only one district. And they are still unable to control it. And there is a de facto control of the militants, different groups. They have distributed the areas like TTP and Hafiz Gul Bahadur. And they have appointed a shadow government. Their intelligence officers, their local administrative officers, on the similar pattern, the way Taliban did in Afghanistan before they took over Kabul completely. And they had their shadow governments in Afghanistan in different areas, apart from where when the de jure government also existed. Now, coming back again to the question whether there is if there is a serious will to contain or stop these things, which personally me and most of the people still doubt. They doubt because when they were supporting Taliban to capture Afghanistan, to take over Afghanistan, it was a very common, it required a basic common sense to understand that there is no difference between Afghan Taliban and TTP. They have been, the TTP have been working under the umbrella of Afghan Taliban. They have been trained by them. They have been funded by.
Why are they classified then? There's no difference. Why are they classified? Why are they?
You know, even at that time, before they took over the Kabul, when they were keeping and protecting and providing all kind of logistics to the Afghan Taliban, even at the same time, they were the TTP and the local groups were attacking Pakistani military. So this confusion and their policy, which I believe, and there is a common consensus amongst the general public that it is deliberate. And as I said in the start, that it might be for some greater strategic purpose of the West. And that's why they handed over. Like the question also arises that even after spending more than 20 years in Afghanistan, why did the US hand it over Afghanistan to Taliban just like a piece of cake after fighting them for 20 years? And apparently knowing that they have sanctuaries in Pakistan, and knowing that they're operating from Pakistan, and knowing that all the fund which we are giving to the Pakistani government in terms of the coalition support fund and XYZ, they're indirectly coming in the support of these groups, and then these groups are then killing us in Afghanistan. So this is in this whole cycle, maybe for some strategic purposes, they have been doing it. But as I said in the start, that there is a very serious mistrust on the actions of Pakistani military by the general public, and that's why we call it a controlled project, because previously, a few days ago, I was talking to one of the news channel in an interview that there is one of my friend who used to be a member of parliament from Lekki Marwat. He sent me a video, and in that video there is a police station in Lekki Marwat which comes in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, and the police station is covered by all kind of safety measures. And there is another police station almost 100 meters away, which comes in Punjab province, and the policemen, they are sitting, without any fear outside the police station, and you know that there is not even a sense of something like that happening across the province. And this is why these things are getting worse every second day. Previously, yesterday there was an attack on Di Khan in the heart of the city, and Banu, Lekki Marwat, Tank, Garasmail Khan, even up to Karak, Malakan division, Bajawad, the rest of the tribal area, there is a very significant presence of Taliban in almost all over the province. And this is increasing because, after being through all this chaos and watching them very closely, there is a realization in the general public that what's happening on. But then, still power attracts people. If you can manipulate 2 to 3% of the society, the youth, which is attracted by power, the weapons and everything, it can make quite a difference. So when a state tries to run something, I think attracting people, and I think it's not a big deal then. So this is unfortunate, but the problem is that people have realized all these things. People are coming out, and there has been a very long resistance amongst the Pakhtunkhwa. They have tried to stop the leadership, but people are coming out without leaders. Someone just randomly posts on the social media, and then the next day, the entire locality, they come out and, they just oppose these strategic adventures. So there is a fight going on by the general public among the masses in Pakhtunkhwa and the strategic architects of this current chaos.
So tell me what you make of the recent attack, between Afghanistan or Pakistan and Afghanistan. Pakistan tried to target a TTP leader in Kabul. Afghans were saying that this is a huge red line for our territorial integrity. They're blaming each other. So how do you see this? Could this escalate to something bigger?
Look, we have been saying it from a very long time that this chaos, which started from the Doha deal, it will not stop in Afghanistan. It will cross the Durand. It has already crossed the Durand, and it will go all the way to the Wakhan corridor in Pakhtunkhwa in Afghanistan. There is already a presence of Taliban. So this entire belt will then in the future be used against China. Now, as far as the recent conflict is concerned between the aerial attack by Pakistan Air Force, I think it is unprecedented. But they did it because they knew it, that the regime, that the people who are now by force ruling Afghanistan, they do not have the legitimacy to rule Afghanistan. So they are on a weak position, and whatever they do, whatever we do, they do not fear any kind of response or reaction from. I call it a show between a student and their mentors. It was just something like that. If you just concluded, one thing is very clear: Taliban are very much sure that Pakistan is their permanent backyard, and they also believe that they are not a permanent reality in Afghanistan. So I think up to some extent, yes, but whatever is happening, I think it is happening according to the plan. The conflict, it is a kind of orchestrated to create a public support or acceptability for the Taliban amongst the general public in Afghanistan. And I have seen on the social media that many people who have been at some time critics of Taliban are now, coming out in support of them. Well, the fact is that it didn't happen over the night. They stayed in Pakistan. They were trained in Pakistan. They were protected in Pakistan for more than 20 years. And then they were imposed in Pakistan. And it was very much obvious that whatever right now happening is, it is happening according to the plan. But as I said, Pakistan, they have never, they never cared about what happened to its people here in the country. They have always, specifically to the military generals who have almost been on the, who had always had the upper hand in every time of the conflict, just like, the Cold War, military general Ziaul Haq was ruling even after 9/11. Another general, Pervez Musharraf, was ruling. And right now, apparently there is a democratic government, but the fact is that this democratic government, there is hardly any government which is that much weak in the history of Pakistan. So it's the army chief who is calling the shots, and it's the military who is making the policies. And as I said, they have been doing their strategic adventures for a very short-term goals without realizing that what the cost of that adventure going to be in the future for this country.
When Afghanistan's previous government collapsed, there was a narrative about how Afghanistan is considered a failed state. Do you believe that Pakistan is considered a failed state? I mean, given the increased uprisings, the domestic terrorism, the insecurity, would you consider Pakistan a failed state as well?
Well, I think the way democracy prevailed in just 20 years in Afghanistan, I think Pakistan still have to achieve, I think I would say, half of that. As long as if you talk about the fail or a successful state, the way things were manipulated in Afghanistan, the way things were designed for the collapse of Pakistan globally. And I think if the same things happen to Pakistan or any other country, their fate will be not, it will be the same like Afghanistan.
I mean, also given their international standing, because unfortunately, the reality is there's many countries that view Pakistan as a country that harbors terrorism.
Well, it is a fact, it is a well-known fact, and it is an established fact. The way we have been talking about it since the start of this webinar. Temporarily, you can get some short-term gains, but in long term, established countries, it cannot be run like that. Unfortunately, Pakistan is going through this. But again, every adventure they have done was for the strategic, I think, objective, or I would say the strategic gain of the US and their allies. How long they want to keep it like that? I think it's a matter of time. It won't take that much, but I believe that if, as you have compared it with Afghanistan, the kind of conspiracy which was planted against Afghanistan, the kind of conspiracy which was designed for the collapse of Afghanistan, I would say, if the same is planned or imposed globally against Pakistan or any other country, with the political, unrest like the way it is in Pakistan, or with the economic condition like the way it is in Pakistan, I don't think so that they can also face it.
Thank you. And now, Mr. Daudzai, I want to ask you about what you make of the Taliban's visit to India. I mean, it seemed that India really warmly welcomed Taliban's foreign minister, Mr. Mataqi. People are saying that, it was a red carpet welcome. So what is New Delhi trying to show to the world? Is it trying to expand its leverage in the region? And where does this leave Pakistan?
Okay, thank you. Before I come to answer that question, I would like to briefly expand on what Dawar have said, that in the Doha agreement, the Americans gave the Afghan government as a piece of cake to Taliban. I agree with that, but the question is why? Why the US reached that point that they handed over power to Taliban? And I think there was a very clever regional game going on for quite a while. That regional game included Pakistan, China, Russia, and partly Iran also. They managed to indirectly put the US in a situation where the US think that Taliban were a better alternative than the Republic. Because after all, for the US, it's always about the cost of blood in dollars. And the cost of blood in dollars in supporting Republic or safeguarding the interest through Republic was very high towards the end. But here, they thought that it was their own idea, but actually a game was played cleverly with Americans, that they thought, well, Taliban are very cheap in terms of blood and dollars. No American soldier would be killed, and with $160 million a month, they could achieve or safeguard all the interests of the US in the region. And I think that's what's happening. So if anything happens down the line to Pakistan, that's in the line of safeguarding Americans' interests. Or if anything happened to any other country, that's in the line of safeguarding the American interests. And I think the regional countries have to wake up and think in a different way. So anyway, and I just want to clarify another thing to my brother Dawar Sahib. You see recently that some of the enemies of Taliban are now supporting Taliban against Pakistan. Yes, you are right. But believe me, most of them are playing a game again. They consider Taliban as enemy and Pakistan as enemy. So if the two fight each other, then they benefit ultimately. So game was played with those Afghans, and now they play exactly the same game with Taliban in Pakistan, and they're so pleased that the war is going on between Taliban and. So, in respect to your question, Kuzat, yes, the mistrust between Afghanistan and Pakistan, or Islamabad and Kabul, has always been on two major issues: the Durand Line and the level of Kabul's relationship with New Delhi. That has been the two issues of contention if and when there were stable capitals. Now, last time when Taliban were in power, India was expelled from Afghanistan altogether, and they faced a plane hijacking in a very nasty circumstances developed there. This time, India is richer, much richer than it was in 1990s, and they were also watching the whole game that was being played. So they have now managed to make the friend of Pakistan, to turn friends of Pakistan into enemies of Pakistan. And they invited Mutaqi. Now look at details. When I was Minister of Interior, I visited India in my official capacity. From a meeting, I came out and there was somebody who told me that, please come here, there's a couple of media people, they want to talk to you. So I went there and I was put in a situation that I had to say something which caused me problem. Look, what I said. They asked me that there's been a bomb blast in Herat, and your spokesperson said that it was Lashkar-e-Taiba. What do you say? So how could I reject the words of my spokesperson in Kabul? So I had to say yes. And then, wow, they made such big stories out of it. And then my Pakistani friends told me that you are allowed to say anything about us, but not when you are in India. So here comes Mutaqi Sahab. In India, and India is using that trip to show to Pakistan that we can buy your best enemy and we can turn him against you, and you can't do much about it. And by the way, Mutaqi Sahab is one of the best friends of Pakistan amongst the Taliban. He's, in terms of relationship with Pakistan, he's not the ordinary Taliban, because he has a marriage relationship with Pakistan. All his business are in Pakistan. And look at here, that because he wanted to show that, wow, I get closer to New Delhi, and New Delhi might follow Russia and announce recognition of Taliban. But I think he's going to pay a huge cost when he goes back to Kabul. So to summarize, it's all games that are being played, whether it was republics, games were played with us. Now we realize most of it, that how cleverly they were played. And Taliban's level of education and understanding is not equivalent to that of Republicans. So they are much more simpler people from the villages and from madrasas, and they are easily being deceived and bogged into these huge, nasty issues, problems. The outcome, I am sure, the outcome will be failure of extremism, failure of Taliban. That I can see it down the line, that I can see it in the pipeline. But unfortunately, lots of Afghan and Pakistani blood would be shed before we get there.
So I also want to ask you, in terms of how the region should be dealing with the Taliban. I mean, we just saw India and how they welcomed the Taliban, but the rest of the countries. I mean, there's different schools of thought occurring, and that is one that the Taliban are a reality and they have taken hold of Afghanistan. We must interact with them. We must engage with them. But there's another school of thought that says, no, the Taliban do not represent the Afghan people, that they are a terrorist network, they need to be eradicated, they need to be isolated. So how should the region approach the Taliban with these two different mindsets?
Well, I think I'm a person against war, against violence. We have seen that it's in nobody's interest to continue with violence. And regime changes through violence also never gave a good result. We have so many examples. So if there is regime change, or a smaller than that might be leadership change in the beginning. Now, if we are moving into that direction, then the engagement I would support. Everybody engage with Taliban, I would support. You are right that they are the reality. But engagement has to be conditional. If Afghan women cannot work, if Afghan girls cannot go to school, if the ideology is that in the Afghan embassy in New Delhi, he holds a press conference and does not allow the women journalists. And that was a huge embarrassment for India. And then they begged Motaki to hold another conference and invite a few lady journalists, otherwise India would lose face. So this is, I think, petty diplomacy. I think I support diplomacy, I support engagement, but conditional engagement. Agreement from Taliban to agree on the reforms that they had promised the world in the Doha talks. We don't want to get out of the Doha talks. In the Doha talks, they promise inclusive government, inclusive political process. They have to deliver on that. They promise not to let Afghan soil being used against anybody, any other country. Look, we are talking about TTP. Where are they? So it's violated. And then there are 22 other terrorist organizations. And the third one is they promise that the Afghan citizens, men and women, will be given their due rights. And they're not giving, and they're systematically and increasingly denying those basic human rights. And how, for those regional games, you can see they engage with them, starting with Russia. And then now we see India unconditionally coming forward. But I think, like I told you, that this game is far more complicated than a simply inviting an ambassador of Taliban and treating him well here or there. It's a lot more complicated. I conclude this part of my remarks that years back I had said that in and surrounding Afghanistan, plans doesn't work. Accidents drives issues. Accidents drives circumstances, not plan. You may have a plan for something, and there is accident that drives you far away from what you had planned. We saw it in 9/11. We saw it just 2 nights ago in Kabul, and we will see more of those accidents that will determine the fate of Taliban and Taliban's relationship with the region. So I buy the argument that Taliban are reality. I don't go to the reasons why they became that reality. They are there as a power, but they are danger and they are risk to humanity, let alone the region. And I agree, region should engage with them, but conditionally, provided that the level of engagement you increase against what Taliban deliver to Afghan people and the region, and to prove that they are increasingly becoming a responsible state in the world arena.
But given what you said, I mean, it's been 4 years now, right? 4 years is enough time to see how a group can conduct itself. I mean, girls are still not able to go to school. So if in this time the Taliban have not agreed to the conditions that Afghans want, so what should we do now? Do we wait another 4 years? Do we wait another 10 years? I mean, there are active groups even within Afghanistan who want to remove the Taliban. I guess you can call them anti-Taliban forces. Should the region support these forces?
I wouldn't say yes or no to that, because I'm part of the biggest political coalition in the country, which is called the National Assembly for Salvation of Afghanistan. And all the 74 political groups, including the one who fight Taliban or their opposition to Taliban, I'm part of that coalition, and actually I'm chief executive of that coalition. So we, in that coalition, we have decided, or rather we support the idea of regime change, leadership change, because as long as the current group of Taliban who are in power and dominant over the rest, you will never see girl going to school. You will never see women going and you will see more terrorists coming into Afghanistan and becoming center there. So the way forward is leadership change. I'm saying not regime change at this stage, leadership change. How to do it, I don't think I can describe it to you in this forum.
Okay. Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Daudzai. I want to get to now Mr. Durrani. Talk to me about Pakistan's relationship with the United States at the moment. Does the United States have, I mean, how much weight does it have on Pakistan's decision making or its foreign policy stance? The US-Pakistan relationship has been viewed as on and off, with cooperation and tension, some pragmatism. But how does that look like now under Trump?
Frankly, it doesn't look good to me, having seen the history of our old relationship with the United States. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you.
Long, long history in that sometimes out of compulsion, the two countries decided to work together. Strategic relationship, it never was. The closest that it ever came to become, a mutually beneficial relationship was when the Soviets were there. We had the same aims, we had the same objectives, we respected each other's terms, and that worked out pretty well. But the fact is that there are two different countries in all respects, in size, in power, in their worldview, what their intentions are. In this particular region, when they operate, their interests cannot be reconciled with any of the regional countries. Leave aside Pakistan, not even in India. Then maybe you can find some common denominator somewhere. And that is what bothers me the most, that they come back time and again, despite the fact that people here have seen as to how it happens, because they play their cards very well, especially through whatever we call the economic hitman, the strategic hitman, their lobbies, because they keep scaring the leadership. If we did something against the interests or against the displeasure of United States, we will be in trouble. People like me have lost that argument because I have time and again said, every time we decided to act against their desires, we succeeded. Right from beginning 62 war, after that we reached out to China, America was not happy. We still did that, and the Americans came to us and asked us to take Kissinger over the hump to reach. Nuclear, we all know that nuclear program was pursued against the wishes of the United States and its, allies. And Afghanistan, the second time, the 20 years that they were there, our policy and their policy was at odds. We all know that. But we still continued with that for the reasons that I've already said. Incidentally, that brings me to the point that you've raised, that why did they have? They had no choice. The Taliban played their cards so very well that in the last 10 years, they were not only fighting against the NATO forces, they were also getting money from $500 million or more every year from NATO to provide the convoy security. They're cutting opium, they're cutting development. So that's how well they had played their card. And they had no option. If they had to leave, whom they would hand over. So that policy again, right now Iran seems to be one of the hot subjects. People keep forgetting that then the Americans were there in Afghanistan, were working with us in Afghanistan during the Soviet period. They asked us to sever relationship with Iran because of that hostage crisis. Remember that famous one, 444.
Yes.
And the people here had the guts to say, sorry, because of you, we are not going to cut off our relationship with the neighbor. We live together. And the result is that for the last 50 years, the Iranian interests in the US are looked after by the Embassy of Pakistan. And right now, because of all the developments in the Middle East, I think one of the very few good things that we've done is that we have not done any harm to the Iranians uh, in so many different fields that they are pursuing. And I'm very sure that the worst, if it comes again, that we will be standing with these Iranians because that is where the regional interests come. Now, with that type of leadership, when I tell them that, look, we can right now, whenever they ask us to do something, and if we, because of our interest, say no, they are very likely to say, okay, we understand. Bagram, if anyone thinks that we're going to help them get to Bagram, one is living in a false paradigm. Of Taliban, of course, will not give it up, but there is no way that one is going to help. There are other aspects of the relationship with the Americans. I cannot help but quote Kissinger, who said, being our friends may be dangerous, maybe our enemies may be dangerous, but if anyone is friendly with the United States, it's fatal, it's dead. There are enough number of examples of that. If despite that, our people think that they are going to get friendly, by all means go ahead, do some trade, do the IMF, whatever you have to do, must do. But to believe that they can be friendly, that they have any good at their heart for us, that's befooling us beyond redemption. And that brings me to that point I think someone raised about terrorism. Terrorism, the biggest entity that sponsors terrorism worldwide is United States. Daesh is just one example. If anyone has any doubts, I can try and give them many examples, many proofs that Daesh is a sponsored group by the States. Now, if that be so, for us to go gaga about our new, found relationship with the United States is foolhardy. Free lunches, brunches there, the receptions there do not mean anything. Less tariff means nothing. The people who have been imposed higher tariffs like India and China will probably negotiate it much better. And probably will come out because they are playing the hardball, they're playing diplomacy as it should be done. But if you just simply agree to whatever is thrown at you without negotiation, like Musharraf did after 9/11, then you actually come out at the wrong end of it. So that is about the relation. I can go on and on and on about, the dynamics of relationship with United States. Right now.
But about the Bagram, you mentioned Bagram Air Base. How would Pakistan react to, let's say, a US presence again in Afghanistan? There's a lot of buzz about it. People are talking about it. Obviously, the Taliban are disagreeing, but how would Pakistan position itself if such a situation?
No one is going to support another American military presence in the neighborhood. And that includes Bagram, because Bagram is not meant for any, charitable purposes. We declared it, and that is something that was also known. Bagram is there to keep an eye on rogue states like Afghanistan, Iran, Pakistan, China, and so forth. So no support will be given. Mercifully, there is no chance that they can come back to Bagram because Taliban will not allow that. So the Bagram is a non-issue. Like there is another non-issue that was raised, and I get very frustrated when people talk about it time and again. So, yes, talking about Durand Line and the international borders and recognition may be all right for the diplomats. Having seen how the Afghans over a generation, over more than 70 years, have treated the Durand Line, they have not recognized it, but they have also not violated it. And for the simple reason, the tribes on both sides are quite comfortable with this. They're getting the best of both sides. So why should they? In any case, borders like these are becoming redundant. And for us to insist that, well, this is the border between Afghanistan and Pakistan, is not a very wise thing. So I think the Durand line is also, again, a non-issue. Some people here keep insisting on that, but then there is nothing that people like me can do. There are enough number of people who would say, we have to talk about relationship with Afghanistan without these pinpricks and without these irritants, because they are not going. And probably the key question that Lily you've been asking is, how to deal with it? Well, they're there. Everyone says they're there. They are not the best group. We know that the leadership problem, it's Mullah Habatullah, who is against the women education, otherwise most of the people in the Taliban hierarchy are for it, but for the sake of that unity in ranks, because they can't afford to get split, they just go along for some time. They're not forever. Nothing is forever. So that also will change. Afghanistan will come back to its natural moorings, which included a very big role for the women. More professors at Kabul University than the men. Now, that is the history. More assertive housewives than anywhere else. That is the history. That will come back, but of course it will take a long time, and God knows whether it will happen because of the Taliban change and change of leadership, but that is bound to happen. We, for the time being, because of the only game in town right now is Taliban. And my submission here to the people in power is deal with them, don't tell them what to do. Just ask them, because that's their fun. What is it that Pakistan can do for a country that has been in war for 40 years? And now if there is anything that we can do for it, we have done just the opposite, and that is my request.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Mr. Dodzai, if you're with us still.
Yes, I was out for a little bit because where I am, it's evening prayers. It's done. I came back.
Okay, we will wrap this up quickly. Just to talk about moving forward with Afghanistan and Pakistan. How can these two neighboring countries build trust moving forward? I mean, given its tumultuous past, the mistrust and suspicion, is there any mechanism that they can put into place to address the issues of terrorism or national sovereignty or ethnic ties, territorial disputes? Is there space for sincere cooperation? I think this is the big question that everyone wants to know.
Yes, there is. And I think, first of all, people to people, we have absolutely no issue there. They love each other and they connect with each other. And at worst of time, where Kabul and Islamabad was in a loggerhead, where people linked with each other, there were troubles, and also after the 40 years Afghans have been there, there are intermarriages, there are giant businesses, so no one can separate them. People to people, no issue. But government to government, I think, yes, there is scope, but there is condition to that. And a major condition and a fundamental condition is legitimate governments in both cases. If we have legitimate government that stands on popular people support in Pakistan, and the same in Afghanistan. Now, I don't want to comment about Pakistan, but in Afghanistan, we have a government that has support of hardly 2 to 5% of the population, which is the mullahs, the madrasa people. So the rest of the country, they don't like them, but they don't have much options either. So condition is legitimate governments in both sides. And then a giant kind of convention, which we would call it a Loya Jarga, people-to-people convention, representatives of Afghanistan, representatives of Pakistan. I mean, hypothetically, let's say we have a situation that we have democracy in Afghanistan and democracy in Pakistan, and giant parliament sessions of the two countries. They come together because they're people, they're representing people, and they agree on a solution to work together because people want to work together, people want to live together. It's the governments that has issues. And even at the moment, more of an issue is with the Kandahar and GHQ and Rawalpindi. So people say that these are the two that are problem. Politicians always find ways to work with each other. On the Afghan side, there are no politicians. There are only Taliban, and it's a theological regime based in Kandahar. But in Pakistan, there are politicians. So, I mean, a brief answer would be yes, but the biggest condition is legitimate governments in both countries.
Mr. Durrani, I'll ask you that same question on your side, on Pakistan's side. Is there space for sincere cooperation between these two neighboring countries?
Ambassador Dawgzai knows that much better than I do. He's handled bilateral relationships for a longer period, and more recently, mine was well in the past. But I agree with so many points that he's made. But before that, let me just quickly say, when it comes to legitimacy, like he didn't want to comment on our government, I should also not do that on the government of Kabul. But our own government at this time, God knows how legitimacy should determine. The fact is, it is their result of a very highly rigged election. The man who lost and who was more popular, I may not be a very great fan of him, but that's not the point. The point is that people want him, 60 to 70%. So actually, he had the right to. How he would have handled Afghanistan, that I don't know. But legitimacy, in that sense, in the feeble sense, does not belong to the present government. And in any case, the surviving on the shoulders of the tanks. The second point is a very good one, Jirga. I remember when I used to be in and out of Afghanistan in the early 2000s. Ustad Saif, an old colleague with whom one used to deal because he was one of the party, and he was one of the most clever people. People didn't like him, especially from Pakistan, for reasons that I do not know. But for me, he was a very good intellectual, always talked sense. And he is the one who said, if we have a standing council, FPAC standing council, to look after these things, that would be the best one. So this is, I agree completely, some sort of a combined council, call it Jirga if you like, to take care of this. People who know each other, we have already considered that people speaking the sea and air do not know enough. When I was handling Afghanistan, I was new in the job. I learned much more after retirement, after studying, after meeting people. But at that time, depended on what the team told. And if the team was pro one and against someone else, the policy could be flawless. So people who know, and God knows this is a very difficult criterion to meet, especially when it comes to Afghan hands in Pakistan, because as I said, even after 30 years or more than 30 years of dealing with it, I do not claim any expertise. I always get surprised by one thing or the other that the Afghans do. And I always get reminded of, Churchill's famous saying, if anyone thinks that what Afghans were going to nest, that one knows about it, one should get one's head in government. Because over a period of time, they have learned, the Afghans have learned because of their history, not to be predictable and sometimes not to be truthful. Because they play one against the other, and that is the way they have survived over a period of time. So to find the right type of Afghan hands is going to be very difficult. Afghanistan will, or Kabul will have it a little easier because, you're right. People like Muttaqi who know this place, who understand this language, are great friends and are great assets. And they would know. They may have their biases, and that has to be balanced out because of a council, 10 or 15 people there. But ultimately, they would keep the two bilateral relationship on a very comfortable, on a very stable key. It will not break out, it will not change the paradigm suddenly, but over a period of time, I think they will achieve the objective that my predecessors like Aslam Khatak had in mind, is to create some sort of a regional.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen, for your time. I guess we have concluded the end of this session. It was a nice discussion. I see we have one question, though, for Mr. Dawood Zaid. Do you see the question box also?
No.
Okay, I'll read it for you. We can answer this and then we can say goodbye. So Mr. Dawood Zai said the Taliban don't have the same level of education as the Republic and can be easily persuaded or manipulated. So if the Taliban's actions are guided by external actors, can we say that their education level has an independent impact on their political choices? This is a question that was asked for you.
Well, the Taliban has education, Islamic education, madrasa education, and even in the past 20 years during Republic, they were at war fronts, they were in mountains, they were in refugee camps. They didn't have even the kind of non-school education that they could get. So it's not to blame them, but as a comparison, in the Republic, half of the cabinet had a PhD. They were holding PhD, and hardly any one of them were below master's degree. So that's how I compare it. And then you go down. And another figure I gave you, in the day Republic collapsed, Afghanistan had given 1.5 million graduates at bachelor's level. And then some of them had master's, some of them had PhD. And 15 to 20% of those were trained outside the country, including Pakistan and India. The two countries provided generous scholarships. And then Iran, over 100,000 graduates we had from Iran. We had from Europe, from the United States. And this 1.5 million does not include military training or military education. It's only 7. And now when Taliban are back, they only invest in madrasas. They don't even invest in school for boys. They don't invest in universities. Education is collapsing. So that's why I say they are not interested. Their background is not modern education. Let's assume that they visit one of the neighboring countries, Central Asia. The opposite is a diplomat who has high education and extensive experience in diplomacy, career diplomat or political diplomat. But from the Taliban side, Maulai Sahab. So how can you compare them? How can you say that they are? And when I say that they have to fulfill their promises that they made in Doha, because in Doha they made promises that they would allow all educated Afghans to get positions, and they said there would be no limits. Of course, certain positions can go to mullah, like for instance the judicial system, no problem. That's they could run it, or similar institutions. But even the Ministry of Health is headed by a Maulai Sahab. His deputies, his director generals, all the Maulai Sahab. The same with the diplomatic machinery of Afghanistan. It's all mullahs. Even this chap translator is also a mullah. But he luckily somehow migrated throughout the 20 years to New Zealand. He learned good English and he came back. He's translator, but he doesn't have a proper education. So that's why I say as a comparison, the Republic was more educated. And in terms of that education, they were a match for their counterparts in the region. Like General Saab may agree with me that he has seen quite a few Afghan ambassadors throughout the 20 years. So they were no less than any other diplomats from the neighboring countries. But look at the current Afghan diplomats that are representing Taliban. So, I mean, they are not compatible with the world. They are not compatible with the region in any sense. Either the world and the region have to become all mullah. They go to madrasa and they graduate as Maulai so that they can work together. Or they have to change.
Yes. Okay, on that note, again, thank you. Thank you so much for your time. I know it's getting late for all of us. I really appreciate this conversation. It's good to get to know you all, and hopefully we have better Pakistan-Afghanistan relations moving forward, and these clashes simmer down with the TTP and everything. So again, thank you, Tashakkur, Dira Manana.